Hey everyone, welcome to another session of Conversations with Courageous Cancer Warriors. And I have a really great guest today that I'm so excited to chat with. So we are going to be speaking with Lauren Fonvielle, and she is an integrative energy practitioner. So she specializes in EFT and tapping for stress, anxiety, chronic pain, trauma. I mean, we can all understand what those are. So Lauren, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to have this conversation because I'm a believer in energy and having it, having these types of modalities available to us is really life altering in a good way.
Yeah, I would have to agree. All of the different modalities that I incorporate into working with my clients are ones that have personally affected my life, and it's why I'm so passionate about sharing them.
Oh, I love it. So tell me, how did you get started?
Yeah, so for me, I think I was always a pretty anxious kid. I always was kind of managing that, but it was something that I had under control, or so I thought. And then several years back, we got word that my husband was going to have to deploy. And while we had done several deployments in the past, but this was going to be the first one since having kids. And it was also unexpected because he was a reservist and not active duty, because when you're active duty, you have a lot more time to prepare and, mentally get ready for something like that. And this really straight up came out of the blue. And so I just found my anxiety going through the roof. I started having really bad panic attacks, and I knew that I needed to figure something out so that I could feel better, so that I could show up not only for myself and my work, but also for my kids. And so it started with me going to a yoga class and then listening to that little nudge, that little, what I call a soul nudge, in deep inside telling me that I needed to sign up for yoga teacher training. I had seen a poster there that day. And so I did. And that really began my journey. I was then at the yoga studio around lots of people that were into energy work. And I went on to study Reiki and become a Reiki practitioner, and really start practicing meditation and sound healing. And then I was introduced to EFT tapping. And really, I credit all of those things with getting me through a very difficult time. And I've been able to better manage my anxiety and stress. And then I started sharing these tools with other people so that they could feel better in their bodies, because that's really what this work is all about, is figuring out what is going to help you to feel better.
Yeah. And I love that. And I love your journey, right? So when you are with a client, how do you figure out which one of those to do, or do you provide all of them?
Yeah, well, it really starts off by just talking and seeing where you're at. And a lot of the time people do come to me for tapping, as that's something I really specialize in. And a lot of the time they've tried different modalities, and maybe they've seen the documentary Heal, and they've been introduced to tapping in that way. And then they Google and they come across me, and then they want to give it a try. So, most of my sessions do incorporate tapping, but then it's really up to the client and what they feel comfortable with. Some people are curious about Reiki too and want to try that. And it's also intuitively what I feel that the client needs too. And it's always important to me that the client feels comfortable, right? And so it's very much a interactive process of figuring out what we're going to do and how that makes you feel.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because you have so many goodies, as I like to say, at your fingertips. I mean, I am a true believer of Reiki. I am a practitioner myself, so I could definitely understand the benefit. And when you add it with the tapping and everything else that you have available, I mean, it's a powerhouse. It's like that trifecta of what you have going on. So is there an example? Is there a life experience that you have that potentially you'd want to share with us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe even before doing that, I could just explain a little bit more about what tapping is, because I find that a lot of people don't even really know what it is. So tapping is this process of gently tapping on certain points of the body while simultaneously acknowledging the emotions that you're feeling. And I compare it to acupuncture because people are more familiar with acupuncture. So when you go to an acupuncturist, they take those tiny little needles and they put them in at these certain points around the body. And with tapping, we're applying acupressure to some of these same points. And in doing so, there's a lot of science that backs it up, which is why I think part of the reason why I love it so much. The other part is because it just works. It helps me to feel better. But so by tapping on these points, it sends a message to the amygdala in the brain, which is the part of the brain that controls fight or flight. And it tells that part of the brain, hey, you don't need to be in fight or flight right now. And it reduces the amount of cortisol pumping through the body by up to 43%. And that's a study that was done by Dr. Peta Stapleton. And that's pretty phenomenal that you can reduce the amount of cortisol, because cortisol is the stress hormone. And so when you're feeling really anxious and really stressed, that is pumping through your body. So if you can reduce that, you can start to feel calmer. And then when you start to feel calmer, you can think more clearly. And so then as far as giving an example, right, if I have someone that comes to me that I just recently worked with a client that had a lot of medical anxiety, right? She had a lot of trauma in her past with a situation that happened in the hospital with a loved one of hers. And so now she had all of this fear about going to the doctor, and it was resulting in her having white coat syndrome, where her blood pressure was going through the roof. And so she really wanted to get a handle on that, because it was impacting her and her ability to really take care of herself. And so we worked together over about a 2-month period of time. And by the end of that, she was able to go to her doctor's appointment, not have a panic attack in the car, which was typical for her, and go into the doctor's office. She was able to have normal blood pressure, like her blood pressure was in the normal range, which had not happened in a really long time for her too. And she felt calmer, which I think, contributed obviously to her blood pressure being more normal. And because of all of this too, at the end of the time of working together, she found out that she was pregnant, which is something that she had put off for a really long time in trying, because of all of this anxiety about having to go to the doctor. So that was a really cool client story that made me feel good, in that she was able to feel so much better at the end of it.
And I love this example because so many of us have this white coat syndrome, right? Or this fear. I know myself, it's not a typical thing for me, but I have experienced it too, where you're like, there is a dread that comes over you and there's just no getting around it. So the fact that you were able to support her in having this amazing transformation with this thing, some people might think of it as like, what's the big deal? Like, unless you experience this, like, you really don't recognize how real this is for people. And it's like, imagine that they're trying to take your stats, right? Your vitals. And like, here you are, your blood pressure is through the roof, because of, not because of how you are as a being, but more because of the fact of you are just having this episode that you cannot control. So I find that it is absolutely amazing that you were able to have those results with her.
Yeah, it was really cool, because before that they had diagnosed her with high blood pressure, because she was having types of results in the doctor's office. But then when she would leave the doctor's office, she did not have high blood pressure, but they put her on blood pressure medication, which was then making her have low blood pressure, right? Where then she's on the verge of passing out.
Right.
So, it was really, really beneficial to her to be able to do that. And now that she feels more, it was also, I think, the combination of finding a doctor that she feels really comfortable with, and then, being able to feel heard by the doctor. I think that was really important too. But that she had these tools, so we went through the whole process of what that day was going to look like, knowing that appointment was coming up, and tapping along the way at any type of thing, knowing that it's the day of the doctor's appointment. If that brings you anxiety, okay, we're going to use words, put words to that feeling, and we're going to tap on that until that's reduced. And then we moved to the next step of like, okay, we're getting in the car, we're driving there. How does that feel? And then you can put words to that and tap on that. And we just took it step by step, and she had a really great result, which was awesome.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Now, what about your experience with cancer patients? What would be something that you would, or even just caregivers really, right? The anxiety that surrounds the entity that is cancer. So cancer warriors, their loved ones, maybe practitioners. Would there be something specific, a tool that you would be able to provide in order to support them for if they can't come and see you? Is there something that you would provide as
Yeah.
as support?
Well, a lot of my clients I do see virtually, so
Oh,
this
good.
it doesn't have to be in-person work. And I'm just thinking of my client that currently is battling breast cancer, and in the work that we've done together, we've uncovered this feeling of people pleasing, of not feeling good enough, like just being who she is. And this goes back to things that have happened in her childhood. And that was, and when I think of these things, right, we've all had these experiences in our lives, and those experiences that we have are associated with emotions. And then when they aren't the good, warm and fuzzy emotions, sometimes we suppress these emotions. And I refer to it as stuffing, and we stuff them down. And it's almost like these different layers of these experiences in our life. And so something from childhood can then have that power over you in the present moment. And so tapping is a tool that can really help to get to the bottom of what some of these past experiences are that are impacting you today. And so there were particular events that came to mind for her of where she really felt like she didn't have the power, and how she made decisions with other people in mind instead of herself, and realizing that has impacted how she feels and how she's showing up for herself. And so once she had that awareness, she could begin to act differently and do things differently, because once we have that awareness, things can begin to shift. And so that really helped her. That helped her in the process. And a lot of the time when we have these experiences that have these emotions attached to it, that we haven't held, that we haven't had the time or the space to hold for these events, they are going to come out in some way. And sometimes that does come out in physical pain. And so being able to acknowledge that can be really powerful in releasing it, and then to hopefully feel a little bit better.
Yeah, that's amazing, because we all have a similar story, right? That just like your client, of things that have happened to us in our past that we still carry with us to this day, that we don't even recognize that are there. So
Right.
that's wonderful. And that was going to be my follow-up question, is like, do you work with only people in person or virtual? So you do have virtual modality, right? In order to see people?
Yeah. So I do both. I am located in Delaware, and I do see clients in person, but the majority of my clients are virtual. And as energy knows no time or space. And with tapping, some people will say that that haven't been introduced to it before. It's like they think like I'm tapping on them, and that's not the case. Everyone is tapping on themselves. So it's kind of like a game of Simon Says. Like we talk, and we talk about what's coming up for you, or what the issue is that you're dealing with, right? Whether that's like an emotional issue or a physical issue. And then we put words to that. And that's an incredibly important part of tapping, is using words that are authentic to you. And then seeing where it goes. It's really this process of connecting the dots. And one thing that you say might bring up a thought from the past, or a memory of something that happened, that in your logical mind you feel like that's not connected, right? Like if let's say the thing is like, I'm feeling anxious because I have to go to the doctor tomorrow, right? You might not think that the memory of being anxious about something when you were a kid is in any way related to how you're feeling now. It's like, oh, that doesn't make sense, that just popped into my mind. We always want to try to understand it, right? And sometimes it doesn't make logical sense, right? But then once we continue to talk and continue to tap, the links are kind of made, and then you kind of make that full circle, and eventually you usually do understand why that came up. And I think that's what's fun about it for me, is that you never really know where a session is going to go. And the work can be really, really powerful once you uncover and get to the root of some issues.
I love it. And I know what I'm scheduling myself up for. So I think this is so beneficial for so many people. So folks, those of you who are listening, even if you are not a cancer warrior yourself, right? That we've just proven that it's not just that, like you could really have tools on hand to support you with however you're feeling if you're not feeling your best self. Like this is absolutely incredible. I love the fact that you explained it so well that people can really understand how powerful this work is. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, I would just say, like, if this is something that piques your curiosity, that's happening for a reason, and that you're probably listening to this for a reason. And the reason would be to explore it a little more and to see if it's a modality that can make you feel better, because I feel like, different modalities work for different people, and give yourself that gift of exploring and seeing if it works for you. The beautiful thing about tapping in particular is that there's definitely no negative side effect. And so just give it a try. And if you're interested in more of the science behind it, because I know that when I was first introduced to this idea, I thought it was very weird. I thought the idea of tapping on yourself to reduce pain or to reduce anxiety seemed a little bit out there. But once I was really able to kind of sink my teeth into some of the research behind why it's working and what's happening in the brain. So if you are like me and are curious about that stuff, I would really encourage you to check out my free masterclass on my website, which is mindshiftwithlauren.com/masterclass. And I go into a lot of detail of the science on there, and you get a full tapping experience, and you can see how it feels for you and your body.
I love that. Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that. Yes. So I'll make sure to provide that link in the bio here for this episode. So folks, those of you listening, if you have any curiosity at all, Lauren is your girl. Please go visit her website for this free tool that's available to you. Lauren, it was so amazing to have you on here. So outside of your website, is there other places where people can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram if you look up Mind Shift with Lauren, and yeah, follow me on there. I also have on my website, mindshiftwithlauren.com, I have a sign up for a newsletter where I send out tapping videos each week, so you can tap along with me. And I'm always up for answering questions on anything that comes up. So please feel free to reach out.
I love that. So thank you so much for your time today. This was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.